This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. It's Friday, so we're just going to have our usual bit of Friday chit-chat. I thought what I'd do today actually is, well, let me explain. I did a video a while ago about my top 5 or my 5 favourite YouTube channels that I watch. And in the comments below that video, a lot of people said, oh, you didn't mention this channel or you didn't mention that channel. So I am going to do a part 2 of that video at some point. Just give it a little bit of time, actually, so we're not revisiting the same subject too soon. But one of the channels that's going to be in that list is a channel called Sea of Tranquility. And if you don't know it, it's basically this chap, an American chap called Pete Pardo, who just sits and talks about his favourite music and does it in an entertaining and engaging manner. And he does all kinds of things where he'll like do the history of this band or the history of that band, you know, and kind of a bit like the Rock Family Trees show that used to be on TV. And another thing that he does is he will take a particular band, whether it's, I don't know, Genesis or Judas Priest or, Spooky Tooth or bands like that. So it gives you an idea of his kind of musical era. And he talks about their albums and he ranks their albums in order from least favourite to favourite. And I thought it would be interesting to do that with, my guitars. I thought I'll steal that format basically and do, all of the guitars I've ever owned in ranking from, my least favourite to my favourite. But as you can see, scrolling past on the screen here, that might be a bit of a long video, to be honest. So what I've done is I've slimmed it down to the 5 guitars that I've owned over the years, which I think have shaped me as a musician. So, let's talk about guitars. Here they are.
K. Student Steel String Acoustic.
Yes, this was my first ever guitar, a K Steel String Student Acoustic model, and I bought it when I was 11 years old in 1978. I can actually pin down the day-ish that I started playing the guitar. At some point during the long summer holidays, and this was the summer holidays when I'd finished primary school and was going to secondary school, the big school as it were. At some point over that summer vacation, I decided that I wanted to play the guitar. So I ordered one or got my mother to order it from her mail order catalogue, Great Universal Stores, I think it was. And there was always some kind of delay. It was kind of, it was out of stock or this or that or the other. Anyway, it finally turned up on my first day back at school, at the big school. So that'll have been September whatever it was in 1978. And it was a horrible thing, to be honest, but I didn't know any better. I didn't know that a comfortable guitar was a guitar with a low action. This had a horrible high action. You could actually fit, a ballpoint pen underneath the strings by the time you got to the 3rd or 4th fret. Not that I was playing that high up the neck anyway, and the fret ends were, the archetypal cheese grater fret ends that would cut your hand to shreds. But it did a very important thing, that guitar. It turned me from being a musical spectator to a musical participant. And, as soon as I managed to get that little 3-cornered triangle D chord shape learned, and I could change from that to an A7, I could play, a simple song, just kind of swapping back and forth between those 2 chords. And the thrill of being able to pick up a musical instrument and get a sound out of it, a musical sound out of it, that was the best thing in the world for me, and it's never ever left me, and I don't think it ever will. So, what's next? Woolworths
Top 20.
Okay, the Woolworths Top 20. Right, yes, this was my first ever electric guitar. I've talked about another electric guitar I had very early on, the Satellite Les Paul copy, but this was the precursor to that one. And I got this maybe a year, 18 months or so after I got the K acoustic guitar. And how I got it, there used to be a show on the local radio station, Radio Tees as it was called then, it's TFM now, and it was called Tradio. Does anybody else from Teesside remember that one? And it was like sort of early 80s or late 70s equivalent of eBay. You just used to phone into the radio station and buy and sell stuff over the air. And this electric guitar came up for sale, and I had in my piggy bank the princely sum of 23 quid, and the lad wanted 25 for it, but I managed to beat him down. And as you can see, it's vaguely Strat shaped, or I would probably describe it as being something like, if you imagine describing a Stratocaster to someone who'd never seen one before, and then they built one in the dark with their feet while they were drunk, you'd have something a lot like this. And, getting it home and plugging it into the amplifier, which wasn't really an amplifier, it was me Amstrad hi-fi stereo system, or music centre as they were called in those days, had a mic input on the front, and I soon discovered that if you turned the guitar up full and turned the recording input level up full, you could get this wonderful, gnarly, distorted sound, which completely ruined the stereo. But, hey, you don't care about that sort of thing when you're an adolescent, do you? It was an okay guitar. It had a lot lower action. It was playable up above the 5th fret, which was more than you could say for the K. And I think I'm correct in saying I did my first gig with that guitar, if you can call it a gig. It was like a school carol concert sort of thing that I was drafted into playing because, I wanted to, I wanted to be involved in that sort of thing. And as soon as the music teacher knew I had an electric guitar, I was on board. And I think we played Mary's Boy Child, the old Boney M hit. That was my first electric guitar, and basically the thrill of being able to play over here and the sound was happening over there. That was such a novelty as well. And anyway, let's see what's next.
CSL Strat copy.
Okay, a CSL Strat copy. Now, this came along in, I guess, about 86, and I'd recently seen the, I don't know if you know it, it's on YouTube, if you haven't seen it, Carl Perkins and Friends, a Rockabilly Session, and Eric Clapton was one of the guests on that. It was like an audience with Carl Perkins. I think it was Dave Edmunds' band who were providing like the backline for this. And, Ringo Starr came out and did a couple of tunes, George Harrison, I think a couple of the guys from the Stray Cats were there, and Eric Clapton came out, and this was still while he was using Blackie, his famous mongrel Strat. And I have never to this day heard a Strat sound as good as Eric made Blackie sound on that gig. And I just knew I wanted some kind of Strat guitar. The guitar I was playing at the time, I think I had an Ibanez Iceman. I'd sort of traded me way up to that by that point, and I just bought it because it was a wacky shape, and it was an Ibanez, and I knew that was a good brand. But suddenly I wanted that Strat sound, and the sort of Knopfler thing was influencing me as well. But I really wanted the guitar tone that Eric had on that Carl Perkins thing, and that was a guitar that really shaped me. That sort of position 2 or position 4 place on the Strat switch, that was just, it was like the only sound I used for about 10 or 15 years. Eventually, I kind of, I think I sickened myself of it. You know the way you do when you get really drunk on one particular form of alcoholic beverage and you can never face it again for a long time. I've sort of I went away from that sound for a while, but thanks to this guitar here, the Deluxe Nashville Telly, thank you, Joe, once again. I am sort of coming back to loving that sound again. So yes, the CSL Strat copy. This isn't mine. Mine was actually a Sunburst one, and I think if you look closely, you can see that one's a hardtail. Mine was the Trem version, and like all cheap Strat Trem copies, it used to go out of tune horribly, but anyway, that's another story. So that was the CSL Strat copy, and I just couldn't wait until I could really get my hands on a real Fender. So, next.
Fender Heavy Metal Strat.
Yes, the Fender Heavy Metal Strat. Reading guitar magazines, as I was an avid reader of in the 80s, everybody had a locking trem on their guitars. I remember even Midge Ure at one point, he had some kind of archtop jazz guitar, like a Gibbs, some sort of Gibson, or it might have been like an Ibanez, maybe a George Benson kind of thing like that. And that he'd managed to kind of butcher a Floyd Rose into that. So you weren't a proper guitarist if you didn't have a locking trem in the 80s. And I was desperate to have a guitar with one of these. And I'd had a couple by this point already. I'd had like, do you remember Hondo 2 guitars? I had one of those, and they made like a copy of a Jackson Soloist or something. It had like the pointy Jackson headstock, and I think it had like either a leopard skin or snake skin style finish on it. It was proper decadent 80s sort of finish to it, but it had that really naff KKT single locking tremolo. The strings locked up at the nut, but they didn't lock at the bridge, and that was absolutely a tuning disaster. So I wanted something with a double locking trem on it, and I managed to get hold of a Fender Heavy Metal Strat. It was this one that you can see on screen could have been my guitar. It was exactly the same, in the same colour, and it didn't have a Floyd Rose on it, but it had the Carla or Carla, whatever you want to call it, Spider, which was like the Carla version of the Floyd Rose. And this began what I'm not even going to call it a love-hate relationship with locking trems. It was just a hate relationship, to be honest with you. I've just never got on with guitars with locking trems. I had a bunch of them, in a row after that. I thought, well, maybe a different guitar. Maybe if I get a Floyd Rose rather than a Carla. And I think I got the Ibanez RG550, which had the Ibanez version of a Floyd Rose, and that was exactly the same. I couldn't keep the damn thing in tune. And then I got one with a genuine Floyd Rose, and I think that was a Jackson, and I couldn't keep that in tune either. Obviously, a lot of people do swear by them, but it just wasn't for me. Whatever the secret is to keeping a Floyd Rose or any kind of locking trem in tune, it eludes me, I'm afraid to say. So yes, that was my first ever guitar that had Fender on the headstock. So it was a bit of a milestone. I felt I joined the big boys club once I got that one, and but ultimately it wasn't for me, so it had to move on. So let's see what's next.
Gordon Smith GS2.
Yes, indeed. Now, I'm sure you're sick of hearing about me talking about me Gordon Smith. This isn't the one I'm talking about, though, the current GS 1.5. This is the one that slipped through me fingers a while ago. My main guitar throughout the 90s and the early 2000s was a Fender Japanese 60s reissue Strat in Sonic Blue, which I ended up putting EMG pickups in, and it was a fantastic guitar, and I loved it. And I wanted a backup guitar to this, while I was kind of playing. So I ended up getting Yamahas and Ibanezes and stuff that were basically Strats or S-type guitars, and they just weren't getting played. So they were there in case I broke a string, essentially, and I very rarely broke strings, so they just weren't getting played. So I thought, let's get something different. And I don't know, I just bought a Gordon Smith on a whim, and I absolutely adored that guitar. It rapidly became a challenger to the Strat for being my favourite guitar. Two humbuckers, simple wrap over bridge, and just a stripped down, no nonsense guitar, which is essentially what Gordon Smith are all about. Beautiful guitar, absolutely played itself. You just had to think the notes rather than play them. And I was seduced by the lure of a PRS and ended up selling it, and regretted it the moment that I was walking away from the post office, having left it there to go to its new owner. And you know, I always promised myself that I'd get another one, and now I finally have. I'm a happy camper, it has to be said. So those are the 5 guitars that I would say shaped me in one way, shape or form or another. I would be interested in hearing your 5, the guitars that gave you the good and bad experiences that shaped you as a player and made you who you are as a musician. So please feel free to leave a comment down below. And with that, I think it's about time to wrap things up for today. It is Friday after all, or it will be when you're watching this, and yes, it's almost beer o'clock. So thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed the video, found it entertaining in some small way, then please either subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't already done so, and leave a like while you're at it. And I'll just say a final thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon. You know who you are. Thank you for your support. I've just finished recording this month's podcast, and that will go live on April the 1st. So along with a rather cool solo that's got some nice bluesy licks in it that you can get your fingers around. And of course there will be more content going live before then as well. All of the lesson content that I put up here, all the tabs and jam tracks and everything for all that sort of stuff will be going up there, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And as ever, if you want to support the channel, you can join the Patreon or buy merchandise or sign up on a course or whatever. All the links are in the description. Thanks for watching, folks. I look forward to seeing you all again next time. Bye for now.